everybody. My name is Jonathan Boyarsky. I'm here with Newchip, and today we're going to be talking about the rise of sports betting. In the past decade or so, it's sort of gone through a transformation, and it continues to revolutionize. The industry is booming. There's been more startups and business in this space than ever before, and we've seen tremendous growth in certain companies like DraftKings and others. Today, we've got three panelists who are going to be talking about it, and we're going to go ahead and introduce them now. Mark Benreus of Creative Wagering. Mark, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mark Benreus. As Jonathan mentioned, I'm with Creative Wagering, and basically got a product that we created back a number of years ago for the horse and dog racing industry. And as everything has changed now with regard to sports wagering, we hope to find a niche that can help the racing industry as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too that not only are we going through sort of an innovation stage of sports betting, but we're also going through the digitalization. And so I think that your kind of company and product kind of takes a modern approach to how that should really, work in practice. And so I think that just that alone has so much potential to kind of, just change the way that we're used to these kinds of betting. But thanks for joining us, Mark. We really look forward to your input. Next, we have Andrew Cross of HotBox Pools. Andrew, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, Jonathan. Everyone, hi, I'm Andrew Cross, co-founder of HotBox Pools. Since the legalization around sports betting in the US, my partner and I have been building a sports betting product that we hope to launch through one of the licensed operators in the US. You could think of it like Super Bowl squares, but offered daily for all sporting events. And a unique addition is we allow players to buy, sell, and trade their squares with other users before and during the game live. So trying to create that peer-to-peer marketplace and interaction while games or events are on their way.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, and I think that that's also another example of kind of some real change and innovation in the space. I mean, even kind of tangentially related is the stock market, which has just started to allow fractional shares, and you see Robinhood take off with that. So there's no reason that like you couldn't create a market for sports betting with certain games. And so I think that kind of live betting in the moment, plus this kind of like willingness to trade, I think is going to really transform the way that we approach that. And your company is kind of a perfect example of that. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then last we have Julian Fialkow of Drive by DraftKings, which is a corporate VC. Julian, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, Drive by DraftKings, we're a sports tech focused venture firm, spun out of DraftKings in August of 2019. And we're clearly aligned with DraftKings, but we are a separate entity. We're not a corporate venture arm of DraftKings. So just a heads up, there's certain questions you ask about things I can't really relate to them just because I'm not in that side of the house anymore.
No, appreciate it. And I think Julian's really has some great experience just having seen, dozens of companies over the last year or so in the space, and kind of looking at that from the investor angle, I think is going to be really important. So let's go ahead and kind of dive into the material today. So we've kind of had a wave of legalization, which I think has started to change the industry. And the same way that marijuana has become legal on sort of an individual state-by-state level, but not the federal level, I think has allowed for sort of the slow introduction and sort of, this test of different states about how they go about doing it. So do you guys want to does anybody want to sort of take the lead on walking through where we think that that's headed? And sort of what states we think have gotten it right, and where do we see federal legalization in the next few years? I mean, what's everyone's perspective on this, and sort of how does that affect your decision making, either as a founder or an investor?
I'm happy to take that one. You're definitely seeing a new wave of states now really pushing to have legalized sports betting come into their next bills. The pandemic has clearly taken away a lot of the tax incentives of a lot of these states and a lot of the funding in a way. So there's been no real reason before to expedite the process, but now there's all the reasons to do it. The states need it. They see what's happening in all the states that have legalized it. and you're going to see a huge shift. And obviously, what's happening with sports in general, just the overall adoption, exception of betting. You saw it happen with the match on Bleacher Report. Just the match between like Steph Curry and Peyton Manning, how DraftKings Bleacher Report teamed up, and you saw betting fees and betting odds on every single screen, and it seemed like a native and normal thing. Where a year and a half ago, people would have been wondering what those numbers are. And you see a lot more casual people understanding what betting is, just because it's not this blacklisted illegal offshore act. It's something that's very accepted and almost become a normal thing to talk about, whether it's at the dinner table, whether it's at the office, or just in general.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that there's been a sort of democratization in the same way that like certain stock trading apps have sort of allowed people to access it much quicker. And I think that it's sort of a two-part step to adoption, which is that one, that legalization, but then two, that sort of like innovative and consumer-facing UI UX, so that people know how to interact with it. Mark, you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I know that you kind of work in that space about really trying to create a product that anybody could just walk up to and access, which I think is going to be very important in the sort of growth of this industry.
Yeah, I think that Julian just touched on something that's quite critical in all of this, and that's kind of what when I developed the game we have, I kind of focused on was trying to put something in place that would allow for pretty much any person wanting to make a wager, giving them the ability to do so in quote unquote an educated way. And what we've done is created a game that basically you decide how much you want to wager, how many wagers you want to make with that dollar amount, and press a button. And what our game does is it goes out and makes educated wagers. And by that, I mean they're handicapped. And so it's using, some level of intelligence with regard to the wagers that are being made. And so it's intended to help the players gain an advantage from the standpoint of, making a bet. And it's also intended to bring into play the everyday person. Julian mentioned, sitting around the dinner table and talking and things like that. Yeah, there's a lot of that goes on, but unless you really know how the wagering environment works and how to go about making these bets and understanding them in some fashion, you're kind of on the outside looking in. And what we're trying to do is not only give people an easy way to participate, but also educate them in the process on exactly what it is that they're betting on and how they're betting. We're focused on the horse and dog racing industry to start out with, but the game that I've got is patented, and we're going to be expanding into not only the sports wagering market, but I think another one that's going to be coming down the road will be the esports market as well.
Yeah, no, I think that those are a lot of great points. And I think you touched on something there that I kind of want to explore with the group and want to go to Andrew next with, which is intellectual property in the space. I was talking to a friend of mine who's in law school, and I mentioned how, like, Andrew, you have this company that has a patent on these squares. And he was like, how can you patent something I've been doing at, my Super Bowl Sundays for years? And so I think that a lot of people are uncertain about what that intellectual property looks like, but would really be interested in sort of your take on that and how it's going to impact the industry sort of moving forward.
Yeah, so intellectual property is certainly a very important thing. And in this sports betting space where a lot of things are very similar in terms of lines offered by the different sports books, we wanted to find a creative way to protect what we were building. And as you said, everyone's been doing Super Bowl squares for many years, and it's typically done paper and pencil at a Super Bowl party or in the bars or at your office, and no one ever thinks who owns this, and quite frankly you simply can't own Super Bowl squares. But what we did by adding on this engagement piece, we took Super Bowl squares and we basically owned any sort of marketplace or element of interaction with other users, and that gives us a little bit of a competitive edge versus anyone else who wanted to come in and offer Super Bowl squares. Now, of course, other companies may build a similar product, and sportsbooks may offer Super Bowl squares, as you've probably seen in the first couple of years of sports betting. But again, we have the IP over this engaging peer-to-peer exchange marketplace concept, which we think gives us definitely a competitive advantage. And it was one of the first pieces of that we went after. We really wanted to accomplish this and build a comprehensive patent that we had submitted, and it was approved this past year, and we think that's really valuable. And I think as the market develops, you're going to see other companies with their own IP who they believe are looking forward to see what's going to be the next best product, what's going to be the next thing that engages users. And of course, they want to protect that intellectual property. So we're not the only ones who's patented a gaming technology around sports betting. As Mark obviously said, he has some IP around his product as well. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. And it just becomes an execution conversation, and who's going to execute and who's going to bring in those users to really drive growth of their products.
Yeah, 100%. Julian, I kind of want to get your thoughts on intellectual property from the investor side. How important is it to you? How important do you think it is to the industry, and sort of where do you see it going as things progress here?
I mean, it's kind of tough to answer the question directly, because I feel like every situation is different. There's some markets, within sports betting, whether it's peer-to-peer, whether it's social gaming, whether it's esports betting, obviously sports betting, the fantasy sports, where intellectual property and rights and media rights are going to have different nuances about them. It really comes down to, does this product that someone's building have some sort of moat around it? It doesn't necessarily have to be a patent. If you ask me, patents are, they're great, and it's great at HotBox as a patent, but they're only so valuable, moving forward, just because there's so many different ways to create something, and all it takes is one little difference to build something and say, hey, this is actually not the same thing that you've produced. I honestly think it really comes down to the relationships that you kind of have with the rights holders, and if you're able to have the capital to pay up for them, then it becomes a much more substantial lift. But if there's a way to kind of go around, there's certain things you can't get around. Like, you can't not, if you want to get into the betting space, you can't not pay the licensing fee to become a licensed vendor, or you need to partner with a betting operator, someone who already has the license or the IP. Being a new startup, it's really tough to get that IP, just because a lot of the big names and big companies who have the funding and the dollars to spend will pick those things up pretty quickly, or just acquire a company at a low cost who does have it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that oftentimes intellectual property is only, really valid and valuable once you sue over it, and somebody kind of goes to, is at odds with you, because otherwise
Exactly.
it's used as like a shield to be like, hey, you can't do this. This is ours. But I think that that's a good point. And I think the intellectual property almost always varies with startups and how important it is. But I think it is it's better to have it than to not. And I think it'll be sort of interesting to see what kind of licensing models we come up with in the future, especially with something, like Andrew, which is kind of innovation in the space, which is like a new game. Because, having that infrastructure that the larger players have allows kind of new innovative games to get in there much faster. And so if you could take new ideas for games, patent it, let's say, effectively protect it, and then license it out to a larger player who has access to the customers and to the consumer base. I think that, that could be one very, very efficient model for startups to kind of get going.
Yeah, and that's definitely, what we've recognized. When we first started, we would have loved to launch this to, straight to consumer market. And, as you guys both alluded to, there's a whole bit of licensing around, being able to operate your sportsbook. So, we pivoted to a B2B model, and we've been working with, the sports books and the platform providers of those sports books to, try to show that we're a new product, and we're one that could help, your sportsbook acquire new customers and also retain new customers. Again, these sportsbooks are still very similar in their product offerings. So we believe that startups are going to play a key role in helping diversify and change the offerings and enhance them. So yeah, we recognize all of those hurdles that you guys pointed out, and which is why our model is definitely B2B as opposed to B2C.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that input, Andrew. I kind of want to talk next about just sort of post-pandemic sports betting. I think that we've kind of seen everybody doing it remote for the better part of the last year. But as things start to open up again, I think we're going to see, more, at least the states where it's legal, more, maybe restaurants, bars, chains, wherever it may be, casinos kind of starting to do this a lot more, and people actually kind of betting in person. And so just kind of want to get people's takes on how we see that developing, how long before we're kind of back in full thrust there, and just other thoughts and perspective on how it's going to shift after everybody goes hopefully back to normal.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in with regard to that. I think that you're going to, the pandemic has certainly influenced dramatically the wagering playing field over the last year. And you're seeing, as you touched on, just a great deal more wagered online than you've seen in the past. At least I can say that for certain with regard to the horse and dog racing industry. That's certainly been the case, because a lot of the facilities have been closed down and things like that, similar to what happened with casinos and things. So I think as things open back up, you're going to see more involvement of friends going out and participating on site, things along that line, which is going to lead itself to a lot of different things. The thing that I think Andrew touched on just in his last comments, I thought was a very interesting point. He mentioned how a lot of the different venues that you have out there on an online basis, or even if you're physically at a location, it's very similar. There's not a lot of things to separate one entity from another. They're all doing a lot of the same things, and I think it's really important that what I feel one of the most important things is that we need to bring to the wagering industry something that is new and creative and innovative. And I think that it also needs to focus on what seems to be very important to people in today's environment, which is, the constant stream of ongoing action and, that interaction and all that type of thing that goes along with it. And that's one of the things that, I feel with regard to what's been created by the company I've got, is we've created a product that provides that constant flow of activity. When you make wagers through our game, the game is not only looking at whatever event you might be physically at, but it's looking at any and all races that are going on within that 5-minute period of time. And so it's giving you the ability to not only have the excitement of watching the one specific event that you're participating in, but to bounce to a second one just with the touch of a button on the screen, to bounce to a third one, to a fourth one. And you're getting a constant flow of that information, and you're interacting with it. And same thing that we're looking to do when we get into the sports wagering arena. The same type of thing. We're going to be looking for wagers that allow us to continue to give that flow of information and activity one after another, because I think that's what people are looking for. They like that aspect of being involved and all the rest. So.
Yeah, 100%. I think too that it's also going to be not only about getting people kind of that constant stream, but also getting them involved in maybe sports they don't traditionally know or bet on.
Yep.
And so that's where I think that education piece really comes in. I know people that only bet on football, and that happens, 3 days a week, Thursday, Sunday, Monday. But there's this whole time in between that they've got no interest and don't think about it. And so as we start to introduce, and I think that, we've seen some really interesting growth hacking, where people are giving free money to bet on. And I think that if you start to do that in different sports that people don't typically bet on, you could start to introduce a lot of other options to people that they maybe historically didn't know about or weren't interested in. So I think that that's a really great point. We're kind of wrapping up here. So I kind of just want to get closing thoughts on the industry as a whole, where we think we're headed, and sort of want to start with Julian. What are your thoughts? Where do you've kind of been studying this industry for a while now, but kind of from an investment standpoint over the last year or so, really diligently. So what kind of trends do you see really changing and shaking up this industry in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think it's largest it's adoption, whether it's in stadium sports betting, lounges. Obviously, you're going to see massive media deals. You're already starting to see them. DraftKings just partnered with Dish. You saw PointsBet and NBC Sports. You're seeing Bet365 and Fubo TV. There's a ton of these massive media partnerships now, with big betting operators. So that's going to be one thing you're going to see too. Like we kind of touched on before, the states are going to see the tax incentives. They're going to see, the dollars coming in from sports betting, and they're going to see the fact that a lot more people aren't going to go to the traditional casino again. People are going to want to be much more digital and at home. And so you're just going to see a lot more, second and third screen, whether it's going to be the adoption of AR and VR, which is still things that really hasn't picked up enough steam yet. And then there's things like what Andrew is doing with Hopbox, like these things that before were kind of a pen and paper experience that now are being much more digitalized with unbelievable UI and UX and ease of use, and stuff that Mark's doing where it's allowing people to kind of stay on one screen and be able to do many bets on many different types of sports, where before you'd have to go to a different app or you'd have to put a different account in, and things weren't very streamlined. Where now you're just going to see, obviously, the trends and the tailwinds are moving in the right direction. I mean, you're seeing it with NFT now, with these non-fungible tokens, and how digital art and just cryptocurrencies are becoming a huge focal point. It doesn't have to be in betting per se, but you're just seeing everything kind of becoming digitized. So it's going to be a very exciting but also competitive landscape in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, 100%. Andrew?
Yeah, I'll just, I second everything that Julian said. There's a lot of great points, and we're seeing during the pandemic almost 90% of betting done mobily. And, I think, of course, that'll revert back to a more traditional percentages after the pandemic, around 80% being done digitally. But like you said, everything's going digital. It's a much greater ease of access. Retail, sportsbooks, and venues simply just can't compete with the convenience of digital. And I think, the UI and the ease of use on these new products is going to be what, attracts users. They don't necessarily want to, have to do a crazy amount of research or really have a huge learning curve when they go on and bet. They want it to be casual. They want an easy way to get skin in the game. And, there's these new products that like Simple Bet and others that have come out. Monkey Knife Fight is another one that was just, came out and was acquired, I believe, by Bally's. So, there is a hunger, and I think the sportsbooks recognize that there is a hunger for these new products, and these products that are a little bit easier than the traditional sports lines. And I think that's what we're going to see, a lot of more diversification from the offerings available. And, like Julian also said, the media companies, the media deals are huge. I don't think we're at a point, I think we'll see some more deals be done, but we have to be close to reaching a saturation point, simply because of the large media companies that are out there that are making exclusive partnerships. That's going to dry up at some point. But I think you're going to see that continue to happen until we reach that that boiling point with them. And the greatest example of that is Penn National with Barstool Sports. They were one of the first casinos to come out and partner with a large media company. And I think the outlook for Barstool and Penn is great, simply just because of all of the content they could create organically and push to their users, and that's going to help drive the growth for their platforms.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really great point about media companies and just engaging with the users, because it does become, like Julian mentioned, a question of sort of how much growth and adoption you can do. And that's going to be dependent on how accessible the base is.
Yeah.
And so tapping into those existing companies that have already doing the content and engaging with the customers is really important. Mark, your kind of closing thoughts here?
I would echo a lot of the thoughts that Julian and Andrew just touched on. I guess the biggest thing I would touch on, and Andrew mentioned it in his comments, is the world today is one of convenience, and it's one of making things as simple and easy to participate in as possible in most instances. And I think that convenience part is one of the things that's going to help, really drive this industry, because frankly, it is a very easy thing to do, and there are a lot of different options that are out there. But that said, the other piece that I think, going to Julian's point on the competitive, in the level of competitiveness that there's going to be within the industry, you need to have some type of a niche. You need to have something that separates you from all the others and doesn't make you the same old, because the same old is going to be controlled and dictated by the people that have, been in the industry for a long period of time and have established those markets and things like that. And I think Andrew's product that he's got is in that, is in that niche category. And I think that provides additional benefit. We think that what we've created has done the same thing. And, then it leads to the aspect of the interactivity between, what you're able to provide for the people that are participating, with the wagers that they're making, and that type of thing. But it's going to grow. It's certainly never going to get smaller than it is today. It's only going to get bigger and bigger as time goes on. And the reality is, at the end of the day, when I created the product I did it with one thought in mind, and that was to try to help the racing industry as a whole, because back 15 years ago, it was in decline. And that was my objective. And the reason I did that is because it's just fun. It's a fun industry to participate in. And I think the sports wagering and all of the other different things that we're talking about here are just an extension of all of that. And for me, that's what it's all about, making a fun entertainment experience for the people that are going to be participating.
Yeah, 100%. I think that point about accessibility and sort of just consumer ease is like one of the most important ones to be made, which is, if we want people to adopt, we need to make it easy for them to get on board. And so I think that every product out there needs to have that in mind. And I think that those other thoughts that you had are fantastic. Well, thanks so much, guys. I think that this has been a great panel talking about these kinds of nuances within an industry. I think is really valuable, especially to the startups and investors in the space. And I think this also does a good idea of sort of getting people more familiar with the space as a whole. I think that it's sometimes complicated and difficult to navigate, but talking about the different relationships, the different players, and sort of what's going on here is really important. So I thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you more in the future. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure.
Yes,
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.